My name's Aers. I'm the Technical Director for PASMA. That's the Prefabricated Access Suppliers and Manufacturers Association. And I'd like to talk to you today about PAS 250, which is the new standard for low-level work platforms and which sets the benchmark for this type of work equipment. I was going to do this talk from the platform, actually, but then I decided to follow the rules of the work at height regulations, which says avoid work at height. So here we are, we're at ground level, we're safe. And PAS 250 was developed by the BSI and sponsored by PASMA. And PAS stands for Publicly Available Specification. It's nothing to do with PASMA, it's coincidental. It's a lovely coincidence, but it's nothing to do with that. So it's publicly available specification. And a publicly available specification is a fast-track method of starting a standard. And it has to follow guidelines and rules that are set out by the BSI. And key stakeholders are brought together to all put together to produce a BSI-endorsed product specification that has all the functionality of a standard and will become a standard. And it's used for the practice of creating management systems, product benchmarks, and codes of practice. And the steering group which produced the final draft was made up of representation from the Association of British Certification Bodies, that's not easy to say, the Health and Safety Executive, Hire Association Europe, the UKCG, the Ladder Association, and the PASMA Technical Committee. And after 2 years, the PAS will be reviewed, and then a decision will be made how it can be adapted into a full BS standard. So where does the number PAS 250 come from? Well, again, it's a happy coincidence. 250 was the next number available on the list, but it's also the maximum height in centimetres that a PAS, a low-level work platform, can have. So, the official title, PAS 250, catchy. It's a low-level work platform with one working platform with side protection for use by one person with a maximum working platform height of less than 2.5 meters specification. You can't imagine how long it took to think of that title. It was very boring. But it's a low-level work platform, commonly referred to as a podium or a pulpit, and they became extensively used following the implementation of the work at height regulations in 2005. As an alternative, really, to steps, platform steps and swing-back steps, where people needed a new product. And that led to a very big demand instantly for products of this type. So they're somewhere between a standing platform ladder and a mobile tower, but the designs were developed in the absence of any standard. So manufacturers, designers had nothing to work to, and some came up with very good designs, and some of those designs were maybe not so good. And it always happens when you develop a product in the absence of a standard, you get massive variations in performance. And by adhering to a standard, you get specific design criteria which ensures that products are safe. So, PAS 250 makes requirements on the following issues: materials, design, dimensions, strength tests, stability tests, markings, that's another word for labels, and user instructions. And the majority of the requirements in PAS are assessed by tests. So that's a very important feature of it. There are specific tests throughout the PAS to assess whether these things, whether these criteria have actually been met. So let's look at some of the design requirements of PAS 250. First, the dimensions of the platform. It has a maximum size of 600 by 950. Constraining the maximum size does a number of things, but one thing it does very well is to limit the number of people who can stand on it to one, which is what it's intended for. You could make it bigger, but then two people will try and fit onto it. You can get 20 people into a Mini, but you can't get 20 people onto the platform of a PAS 250. Constraining the minimum size, and the minimum size is 500 by 500, means that if you're suitable to work at height, how shall we say, that your size allows you to work at height, then you'll fit into a PAS 250 compliant product, and you won't be a rather large peg in a very small hole. It must have side protection conforming to the standard side protection requirements of the work at height regulations. That's a minimum principal guardrail height of 950 millimetres with a maximum gap in the protection of 470 millimetres. So a 470 sphere shouldn't pass through any of the openings in the side protection. And it should have the facility to fit toe boards. It may not always have toe boards, because a risk assessment may show that they're not necessary, but it must have the facility to fit toe boards. PAS 250 also has specific dimensions for the access. The access is the ladder, or the steps, where you gain access to the platform. The dimensions depend on the angle of the ladder and the dimensions of the tread, and again they're all specified in PAS 250, and you can see a diagram there on the slide which shows how those dimensions are specified. PAS 250 products have a maximum working load of 150 kilograms. So that's the maximum combined weight of the user, their tools, and any materials. So why is it 150? You could make it more, but why would you make it more? Because actually, you can promote bad practice. By making something with a huge payload, if people see that, they may use the product in ways that it's not fully designed to meet. There's a strength test on the overall structure of 3,200 newtons. So for all of those of you that are conversant with such things, that's 326 kilos in new money, or 51 stone in old money. So a safety factor of greater than 2 to 1. The strength test on the platform is 2,600 newtons, or 265 kilos. Again, all of this is assessed by testing. And the strength test on the side protection is carried out with any gates. So these parts, to let you on, in both the open and closed position. And actually that's a very severe test for some of these products. But it does think about the fact that some people may go up there and they may not close the gate after them. Some products, they may leave it open because of the short duration of the task that they're carrying out. Because actually, to go up there, to shut the gate, to do the task, to open the gate and to descend, it may actually be safer, if it's very short duration, not to shut that gate. If you're going up there to put a box on a shelf, say. But the product still has to be tested with the gates both closed and open. The access and the steps are similarly tested, not only for the strength of the rungs, but for their resistance to rotation. And the wheels, if they have wheels, they're referred to in the PAS, by the way, as mobility devices. It's a lovely name, that, mobility devices. They're tested for strength, and the brakes of wheels are tested for strength, and for their ability to prevent rotation. And finally, the PAS even checks the durability of the markings, the labels that are on there, to assess whether they're going to still be there in a few weeks' time, and to make sure that they'll take reasonable wear. So you can see why we say that PAS 250 sets the benchmark for these products. Probably the most significant requirement of PAS 250 are the stability tests. Insufficient stability and poor rigidity was probably one of the worst features of early types of podium. And PAS 250 checks out that stability against overturning, sliding, when climbing and descending. And of course, it's possible for a structure that is very resistant to overturning, but it can be very floppy, to put it technically. So the standard has this test for rigidity, and that makes sure that the product's not too floppy. It checks the platform is secure and cannot become detached inadvertently or accidentally. And it checks that the wheels, if it has wheels, and any feet, don't actually fall off when you move it around. Again, something that you might have seen on earlier podiums. I mentioned earlier about the requirement for markings, and that is a significant improvement because many early products had no guidance and no instructions. So the markings have to give the identity of the manufacturer or supplier, the date when it was manufactured, it has to show the maximum working load, and it has to show the maximum working height. And the maximum working height is considered to be 2 meters above the platform. So we have the platform level, and then we have the maximum working height, which is 2 meters above the platform. So that gives a user an indication of what he can actually do from the product. The labels must have words or graphical symbols which convey the following messages. Read the instructions, that's always a good one. Don't use damaged equipment. Don't overreach. Don't use on loose or slippery surfaces. Don't use on uneven or sloping surfaces unless the product has leveled. Some of these products may have leveling devices. Never stand on the side protection to gain extra height, something that can happen. And never more than one person on the product. And never move when a person is standing on the working platform. Some of you may be aware of the Friday afternoon construction sport of podium surfing. Many new designs of podium are fitted with 2 feet and 2 wheels, which stops this happy but incredibly stupid and dangerous activity. I've been asked several times if anti-surfing is a specific requirement of PAS 250, but it's not always possible. So it's not a requirement, it's a good thing, but you can't specify it because in some applications, in very tight, confined spaces, full manoeuvrability on 4 wheels is still necessary. That means that you're going to have some manufacturers who offer both and some manufacturers who offer one or the other. But you have to admit that anti-surfing, if it has it, is a very good safety feature because that means the user doesn't have to carry out any action. They can get on and carry out their task, and you're not reliant on them to apply brakes to the wheels. The other symbols or messages required in the markings are never use the product to access to another surface. They're not designed for that. You're not meant to climb up there and then try to get to somewhere else. So it specifically warns you against that. And you shouldn't actually stand on the ladder to work. Again, very few of these are designed. Well, none of them are designed that you should stand on the ladder when you're working. It contains the important message, always inspect before use. So everyone who is a competent user, and users still need to be competent to use these products, should carry out a pre-use inspection before, at the start of each day, looking over the product and making sure it's all there and that it's all working properly and that it hasn't suffered any damage. And face the access when ascending and descending. For those people who aspire to be submariners and come down face forwards, looking outwards, you shouldn't do that. They're not designed for it. You're meant to face towards the product when you're going up and when you're coming down. And ensure, it does carry the message, ensure a side protection gate is closed and locked before use. That's obviously a safety message, but it does you do have to consider in your risk assessment for the task, which you would have carried out under the work at height regulations, what you should do in that case. PAS 250 also specifies that a user guide must be supplied with every product. That's very important because sometimes the labels may get damaged and you need to get them replaced, but you need to have a user guide. And the user guide contains all the information that we've talked about, but it additionally contains information about if separate parts to the product. If it has separate platforms or separate stairs, the user guide should list the parts so that a user knows whether all the parts are there before he starts work. So, competency, even though a PAS 250 sets the benchmark for low-level access platforms, you still need to ensure that the person using it is competent. There's a PASMA training course for low-level access platforms, products with a platform height of less than 2.5 metres, and it's specifically aimed at equipment like the products covered in PAS 250. So if your organisation doesn't have a policy for training on these products, then I suggest you think about that. It's something you might want to put in place, and we can help you with that if you need the help with that. And please come and talk to me afterwards, and maybe I can give you some more information on it. Well, that concludes the talk on PAS 250. I'd strongly urge you to consider specifying PAS 250 products in anything that in any work where you have responsibilities. It's the user that will bring these products and make sure that they get used. And I hope that from what we've said, you can see why we should be taking that decision. Thank you very much for listening. Has anyone got any questions? If you have any questions, please come and ask them now. Otherwise, I'll be at the PASMA pod, and you can come and ask them there. One question from the back.
The competent person, he'll be trained. How often does he have to be refreshed with the training?
The PASMA training course, the low-level course,
yes,
that is run every 5 years. So a person who is trained would have to retrain after a 5-year period.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? We've started. We'll finish. Thank you very much for listening.